But so to get it going, we have Rachel, Candace, Aubrey. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. And Wayne and Melinda coming up to keep it 100 for you all. And you should be for sure in for a show because they're going to make sure that you know what you need to know that most folks won't talk about. So, round of applause for them, please.
What's up, everybody? Not sure what kind of show my friend was talking about.
A good show.
A good show?
A good show. It's happening.
All right.
All right, let's start with introductions first.
Oh, well, first, can we give it up to Wayne and Melinda for pulling this off for 5 years straight globally? Yes. Yes. I appreciate y'all. Hey, everybody. Rachel Williams, currently head of inclusion, equity, diversity, belonging, whatever names y'all want to use, recruiting at X, formerly known as Google X.
Hey everyone, I'm Aubrey. I'm the math path, which means I can't decide whether I'm a math nerd or an empath. But to pay my rent, I am the head of diversity and belonging at Atlassian.
Hey everyone, is this working?
No.
Want to share?
No, we'll get it. We'll
No.
get it, work it out. We'll work it out.
Negative.
We'll come in.
We can come back to me.
No.
Hi, everyone. I'm Melinda. What is it?
That's what we on today? All right. Get it cracking. 43 more minutes of the show.
There we go.
You good?
Yes?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay, great. Hi, I'm Candace. Hi, everyone. I lead inclusion and diversity at Pinterest. I would like to point out that I'm wearing my tech inclusion shirt from a couple of years ago.
Nice.
Ask
Vintage. Way to represent.
All the time.
And way to show us up.
Wear this. No, I wear this like every week. And I'd also like to point out that I think my mic stopped working because this was Leslie's mic and he set it on fire. Stop working. We're back.
All right.
Awesome. It's been 5 years, and you know, we're talking about keeping it 100, and I'm gonna jump around in questions. We had a phone call, but it's been a long day. But I'm just like, we're here now. How would y'all like everything to move forward? Like, I want to jump backwards to like, okay, what we learned over years, but like, how y'all like the conversation move forward?
Well, Wayne, you know me. I'm all about context and history. So I hear what you're saying, but I got to look back.
I gotta look back too.
I gotta look back.
All right? Yeah, sorry to take over, homie. But I feel like we need to look at the mistakes we've made over the last 5 years, which are tied to the reason why we don't have any progress. One of those things, I think, if I'm just to critique the work that I've been doing for the last 5 years, is that I think we started off with looking at the wrong data set, right? Everybody's about data, and that's great. But I think it's the qualitative data that we were missing out on. Numbers are great about who's coming in the door, but really what changes hearts and minds and really informs your inclusion strategy are those stories, those rich stories from the underrepresented groups. Because if you have teams, and you know this about the teamwork, if you have less than 5 people on your team, it doesn't get counted. Generally. People are like, oh, we can start identifying folks and blah, 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 blah. Well, you're missing out on some really rich stories that will help you to change the way you behave, change your systemic processes, all that. So I would say if we were to go back 5 years, we needed to start by listening to the underestimated in our companies.
Yep. Love it.
I also appreciate you're showing us up, rolling it in that suit.
Right.
Right.
Money
like,
green.
No. I mean, I'm here for it. But no, I think, so looking back 5 years, something I was saying backstage is I think we're all publicly funnier. To be honest.
Hope so.
I think that we brought, right? No, and I think the work is incredibly serious, right? Because we're talking about human dignity and human lives. But I think, like, the last 5 years, I don't know if y'all have been underrepresented, but, like, I'm Latina in 2019 in America. Like, it sucks. So I think part of it is actually learning how to find humor and joy as we do work that is often very draining. And I think for me, that's a part of my self-care, right? Can we actually laugh at how fucking ridiculous, how racist
Nice.
America is right now?
F-bomb.
Right? Oh, that was good. I
good.
work for Australians.
Well placed. Well placed.
But I think that's it for me, is actually, I think we naturally really find joy in our communities and connecting with people who are like us when we go into zones every day for work where that doesn't get to happen. But I think that the reason I talk about humor in this work is also because I found it's less scary to the white people. Right, so again, I'm a science nerd, and the fact is, when white people hear about race, right, they get amygdala activation. They're like, shit, I'm being scared by a tiger, evolutionarily. And so being able to bring humor and humanity to the work, I think, is not only good for our own self-preservation, but also actually is useful in moving the work forward and opening eyes and opening hearts. And I think that we were all a little more doom and gloom 5 years ago, and partially that was maybe because we didn't imagine the floor was going to drop out.
I would say 5 years ago, I wasn't on this stage. I had no idea I'd be in California. I was sitting in my office in New York, in the financial district, and what I was getting was, holy crap, people are sharing their data in a transparent way. And I had been working with tons of clients that were like, we'll give you the data, but don't tell anybody else, right? So I was like totally optimistic that like, okay, we rip off the Band-Aid, we show people how bad it is, we help make that more granular, more personal for different people. Like, yes, this is great, because I'd been working with companies that had been doing diversity work for 20 years and was still like, you can't say that, you can't show that. Clearly, that optimism was misguided. And I think what personally, I've become just much more courageous, because I realize that when I walk into a room, I have to almost understand the tolerance of that room to have the real conversations, to be able to get past that like amygdala response when I talk about the fact that, hey, we've actually made some improvement in terms of our data for white women, right? And be able to have that conversation and like manage the room and see what they can handle, because I know that I have to do that to push forward.
Yeah, I think about 5 years ago, the kind of conversations we were having. I mean, we even had a ton of conversations to get people to talk about it on stage. It was that closed. Like, it was not a lot of people were working on it, and the people that were working on, a lot of the companies were holding it as proprietary, thinking that this was going to be their big differentiator. That didn't work out so well for them. but you know, those conversations at the beginning were like real basic. We're a lot further along, I think, in the conversations around this stuff in the D&I space. There's a lot more people working on it. There's a new generation of people working on it.
There's products and tools now.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
shout out to Tequitable. Anybody there, right? What's up,
here.
Tequitable? Shout out to
Right
Jockwell and a couple other folks out there. Yes, I mean,
Yeah.
technology's definitely come along. We also discovered that unconscious bias doesn't work. So
Yeah.
full stop.
Yeah.
You heard it here first. If you hadn't heard it, like, don't spend your money on unconscious bias training.
Please don't do that.
Doesn't work.
I think this goes back to like, there's like conventional wisdom, or these like checklists of best practices, some of which are incredible, right? And some of which actually don't work at all. And I think we were still sort of sorting through that. And I would say there's still a lot of variance, right? There's a lot of legacy companies who are still stuck on that.
Yeah.
But I just need ERGs and it'll be fine. And I don't mean to say anything negative about ERGs, they can be incredible, but like, you can't just put like 10 black people in a room and then solve racism at your company. Like, that doesn't work.
Right.
To
Right?
that point, I would say we didn't include the dominant culture into the conversation early enough and let them know
Yeah.
what their role is in supporting this work. So shout out to all the white men out there that are doing this work, that know your role. If
Yeah.
you don't know, ask. There's a role for you to play.
Yeah.
We'll get you a book.
A couple people are working on books. I would say also on 5 years ago, and I alluded to this earlier, is that 5 years ago, companies were not willing to have a conversation that was called diversity in their organization. Most companies were not. They were scared. And then also we heard so many companies say, well, we want to talk about it once we have something to show.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, in that case, you may never be talking about it when you're going about it. But I get it because you were fearful around being called out or saying something you didn't understand. So a lot of that was the conversation 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And then this conversation, just as a whole, as an industry, wasn't as normal as it kind of it has become, but also it has done this wave, right? Like, I forgot what's called that in tech. Someone has it? Okay, no.
Like a sine curve?
Like a bell curve.
Yes, thank you, nerds.
Right, there we go. Get those two. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Standard deviation.
Yes, that's it. And so it's like the D&I conversations went like, oh, wow, we have data. Yay. Let's talk about data. Unconscious bias. Yay. All right, we don't see the data improving. All right, let's go down here. Then I think Aubrey mentioned we just didn't know how bad society was going to get to take this conversation that we thought was going like this. It's like with a roadblock.
Yeah.
There was a
And then hit us emotional to well, we gotta make some pivots
Yeah.
in how we're emotionally going about doing this work to have the change we want to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
When I think about that optimism I talked about 5 years ago, I'm like, yeah, they're sharing the data. And now when I talk about unconscious bias and I say who's gone through a training, 60% of the room raises their hand. That was really exciting 5 years ago. That most companies were like, yeah, we're gonna give a couple of grand to fund that program, right? And I think that also we started to see allies, some of which were like, coach me, but they were gonna go on stage and actually have a conversation about it. And I think if I think about the 5-year arc, I wanna say somewhere 2014, super optimistic, that momentum continued, and I would say somewhere around 2017, I know I'm being super specific.
Probably 2016, November. what was that?
Probably, yeah, right after the election.
I didn't eat for 2
Just
days.
saying.
That's something did happen. I will say that between the election and
the election.
I don't know that thing. There were people who were willing to get on stage for a little bit and talk about how they felt and some of the things that they were hearing and say those are not things that I value. But then something changed, and now people are afraid again
Yes.
to have the conversation. And a lot of our counsel and our legal teams have caught up, and there's started to become this very prescriptive way you can or can't talk about it. So people who got courageous for a bit and wore the shirts and said the things and revealed things about their personal families have started to step back a bit more.
Yeah, the work now is about psychological safety. And
Yeah, I was
restoring
going to say psychological safety in the world, and then you bring that into the company culture, and suddenly we didn't. I mean, in early 2017, that was a pretty brutal time in a lot of companies where that psychological safety kind of went out the window, and we had to scramble to focus on safety versus belonging.
Still continues
Yeah.
with every tweet.
And I think something that a lot of the folks in the room might not know, but I know that we've talked about privately, which is an issue that those of us are being tasked with answering this question: how the hell do we respond to all of this racist terrorism as a company? And I say that because I'm in rooms where I have this discussion at least once a month, and we go back and forth between, I don't know if I'm supposed to share this, but I will. So when there was the incredibly horrible shooting at YouTube, right? Our whole policy group, including myself, was sitting there, and we're debating, does our CEO make a statement, whatever, and I will say one of my white colleagues was like, we don't put out a tweet when black people get shot by the police, we can't put out a tweet now. And that was incredible, but we thought this was kind of a one-time thing, and so we were making one-off decisions.
Yes.
We had to develop a terrorism response strategy for our employees, because we've decided to stop making corporate statements. We didn't make a broad corporate statement about El Paso. I'm a Mexican-American woman who had to come into work and take care of everyone on Monday. And the reason for that is because we realized responding en masse was creating more trauma.
Right.
And I just think we're dealing with sort of trauma recovery now in this work, whereas we were trying to raise the ceiling 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think that shows up both in our employees and those of us doing the work.
Definitely moved away from data.
Yeah. And Aubrey, you bring a great point. It's we dealing with a lot of things that when we was talking about diversity and inclusion in tech, even before 5 years ago, we didn't think that we'd be dealing with today, going into 2020.
No way.
Right? We just didn't think who took training to deal with corporate terrorism connected to political platform frustration based on individual beliefs and identity? Who took training on that? If you did, raise your hand. You'll stand
Right.
over here. And what's your price?
Did you go to a small liberal arts college?
yeah, right? So it's like we were not prepared for that.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's like now it's like you expecting most companies expecting the diverse employees or the person in your role to like, oh, help us deal with the person, the employee connected to that trauma,
Right.
right? And you take that and self-care and culture and tie it in together, it's like it affects productivity.
Yeah.
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 I think there's something really important you just said, and I'm bad at rules, so I'm gonna ask a question.
Oh, hey, look, this
But-
is our
but-
conversation.
But I think you said something about like putting this underrepresented person in the role, and I want to be really honest with myself, right? When I first got in, I was like, yeah, I got a D&I job, and I look back, I was like, oh yeah, you were just a Latina who was willing to do it. I get that. But I think there's actually a big shift now where we're seeing these jobs open up, but what's happening is companies are actually demanding specialists, but they didn't hire them 5 years ago. So there's a really, really small pool of us who have any significant amount of experience doing this in a corporate setting, right? I don't know, and I'd
We
be
all get
interested-
called for the same job.
Right, we do,
Yeah.
and we talk, and it freaks out all the recruiters. But right, so executive recruiters know that we're all friends.
Right.
but I would just like throw to everyone else, like, how are you seeing this change in terms of the roles of people in this? Because we now have a more robust ecosystem of like activists like us who deal with the bureaucracy, and then activists like you all who are great partners. So what do you see changing in that work about who's doing the work, how we're doing it, what access and opportunities we do have?
Well, yeah.
You know, to me, we need to figure out the education problem because I mean, there are a lot of like my background. The reason that I do this work and understand this work is because I have a hodgepodge of education that includes cultural anthropology, includes storytelling, includes, you know, really how do you create behavior change. There are different kind of pieces you can pull together to get that understanding and knowledge, but there isn't like a degree. There isn't like and there isn't really yet a best practice for like what that even looks like when you're looking for a position. So I think that the default then is, well, look at all the D&I people that are at other jobs instead of looking at like what are those experiences that we can pull into this work. I mean, and so there's a need to kind of look at, well, what is this job? What are those experiences that we need? And also we need to figure out in the education system, like how do we get more people educated in the things that they need to be educated in to do this work well?
Yeah.
It's a
the
real skill.
irony of what you just said is not lost on me in that people don't know what the real job is and what the actual skills are, so they just hire people that have done that thing before. That's
Right.
why we're in the
Right.
situation
Right.
we're in
Right.
general. It's actually happening within our own field,
Right.
which is terrifying in some ways.
Yeah. Very much so.
And I've talked about this a little bit, but I think one of the things that's really impeded progress, and I'll put my hand up as the first person who suffered from this, which is I like read all the gender theory and queer theory and like learned about universal access, but like no one told me I also had to have all the skills of like a P&L business leader
Right.
to get shit
Correct.
done.
Project
And so like I've
manager,
just kind of failed up
therapist.
and had a lot of mentors and sponsors and you two in my DMs and so I would just say that is the thing we don't understand is we both have to know our subject expertise, but we have to be better fucking business people than everyone else because we have to do shit with no money.
Oh.
Correct.
Right? Like we have to convince everyone to shake their couch cushions to fund our programs. So
Yep.
like everyone's like, yeah, that's not a lie. You're just not supposed to say it out loud. and so I think that's the thing we don't talk about is like, Melinda, I know you have incredible corporate experience, and I'm sure that has helped so much in the amount of impact you all have been able to make.
But back to my educating
Yeah.
the dominant culture, we don't have to shoulder this whole thing by ourselves. I'm going around activating a bunch of people who are soft-hearted, kind-hearted, or whomever to do the job that they're supposed to do using their privilege, their power, and their position that I don't have so I can free myself up, right? So that's part of my self-care plan, by the way. Like, activate other folks. Influence and power. Like, I can't do it all. At some point, you have to say that, right? Because you can't be the psychologist, the PM person, the BD person, the external partnerships. You're also on PR. HR, right? Because right now we're all doing PR. Like, you can't,
And
you
you're
can't do all that.
fixing racism.
And, right, fixing the racism, increasing
And
the
the
numbers. I'm
ableism.
hiring people. I'm doing ER. Like,
And that's the thing. That's the thing that gets me is that you have all this responsibility and power, right? But historically, the role that you all have inside these companies, it has not viewed with that level of power, right? You need all this experience, you need all this training, you need all this education because you have to deal with all this, this culture problem. But it's like, oh, go work under HR, under here, and do this one little thing.
I think it's a combination of the folks that they're putting in place, right? Underestimated and underrepresented folks just don't have power, right? But we're all the ones that are doing this work, so there's that.
Right.
And then we have a combination of where we're placed in organizations. Those people who are close to COOs or closer to the business definitely have much more success. Yeah, it's a combination.
I will say, and back to that original question of like what's changed and like how I've changed over this time, it is just building my own education with support from the people on this stage and others on how to influence without power. That has literally been so important. And there's the research that shows that people from underrepresented groups, whether it's women in technical roles, whether it's people from underrepresented ethnic backgrounds, tend to stay at organizations longer because when they found a place where they built up that political and that social capital, it's really important because when they move, it doesn't follow them the same way it follows other people. I've found that I'm getting close to 4 years at Pinterest, and that has been so important for me to be able to go influence the product when we think about who shows up in the images on Pinterest, or to go influence the CEO himself about how he's actually holding his own team accountable. That would not have been possible for me as my job description was written 3 or 4 years ago.
Right. So true.
I mean, I think there's so relationships matter a lot in this work. I think both developing them to get executives to do things. But Rachel, I know this is something you do so well. I'm sorry, I'm not the moderator. I just like when she talks. No, but going back to this sort of education piece and activating allies, I think you actually do such an incredible job of like convincing people to step up. And I'm just wondering if you can talk about how you think about that, because you identify, I know this, as an inclusion purist. And some folks in this work have less willingness and tolerance to do that initial education. So tell me about why you're willing to do that.
And define inclusion purist.
Oh, yeah.
Wow, wait a minute. Who's running this show? Wayne, Melinda, get in here.
Hey,
Sorry.
we all said we
Put her on the
talked to each
spot.
other.
She's smart.
So, I had to learn a lot coming into this role. I'm a black woman, as y'all can see. I am heterosexual. And so I had to learn a lot about things that I didn't have to learn about in previous jobs. And so as I started to learn and educate myself, I realized that I really am here for all people. Now, that also means white men. And people are like, what? But they're, well, they're still here. They're still in power, if you haven't noticed. And so
And
it
there's some
is.
good ones.
Yeah, one that I was in the room with just yesterday. Was that yesterday or the day before yesterday? Anyway, right, we won't talk about that. And I just feel it's important just to pull everybody in with a level of just empathy and admitting that I don't know everything, but I want to learn from you, share your experience. And so, that's just kind of where I'm coming from with the work. I know that hasn't always been popular, particularly in the beginning. People were like, when we started ERGs, for example, a lot of the women's group were like, we definitely don't want any men here. And I'm like, so, your boss is a man, the person running the company is a man, like, don't you think they should understand your challenges so they can help fix them? And by the time I finished convincing them of that, we started to see things move, because there are still rooms where people aren't present, and you need someone in that room to speak on your behalf. And they can only speak on your behalf if they know what's really going on with you. And you have to invite them in order to tell them what's going on with you. And that goes for anybody, any other group, right? So we blacks need to be inviting the dominant culture, whatever culture that is. Same thing, like we need to mix it up and everyone be an inclusion purist. I understand creating a safe space, right? Because I would love to just, be around my sisters all day long, be around you two all day long. That is not the world we live in, right? Let's be honest. So that's just kind of my whole philosophy, my whole get down.
Yeah.
So going back to my first question.
Oh boy. What was your first
What was
question?
your
That
first
was like
question?
30
What do we
minutes ago,
do?
dog.
Well,
Well, so we zoomed ahead 5 years.
where do we want to go?
Oh,
from
where do we want to
here?
go?
Where do we
want
want
to
to
go?
go?
I mean, so we've done all this where we've gotten to a new level in terms of understanding, and but the numbers haven't moved all that much when you look at diversity and like what is it going to take? What is that?
Well, it's going to take us changing the housing prices and how expensive it is to live out here in Silicon Valley. So I'm going to need some political folks, some CEOs, somebody with some money to make some real changes to that, because it's going to take the I don't know what migration this is, the fifth great migration, bringing people from the South and from the East Coast out to California and actually to make change. We can't do that if what is this, the second most expensive economy in the world? First.
I was gonna say,
Damn. See what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I can't convince somebody from Atlanta to move their life here.
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense. But here is where the power is. I understand that we can move offices to other regions, but ultimately the leadership is going to be here in Silicon Valley. The VCs are pretty much here in Silicon Valley. I need people to come here, get that bag so you can get yourself a money green suit, and then go right back to Atlanta. Take your funds back to Atlanta, take your funds back to Detroit, take your funds back to, North Carolina, and get us cracking there. But here first, back there.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if everybody, right quick, I'm not sure everybody understand what you're coming about power, because years ago, like everybody was going to New York, like that's what power was, Wall Street, and there's still power there that they're holding on to, but the biggest donations to the corporations, movements, political campaigns now come from the tech industry.
That's right.
Yeah.
So the power. So Aubrey.
ooh, okay, so I'm about to reflect a conversation I had earlier today, but so I think I agree with you. We need to go where the power is, and in the systems we work in, power equals money. And I think there's a really complicated discussion about those of us doing this work, right? This is activism, this is anti-system work.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of like, oh shit, should I get money for that? And I think
Yes.
ultimately,
No, I was like, yes.
right.
My
And
bad.
so ultimately, the discussion about like, oh, am I being co-opted by capitalistic systems because I'm taking money? It's like, well, I'm pretty sure that narrative is coming from white supremacy, telling people of color that they shouldn't accumulate capital. So like, fuck you, pay me.
Forward.
That only took, what, 40
I told
minutes?
you I would not say
I
white
know,
supremacy
I
in the
know.
first 5 minutes. I'm sorry, Nicole. But no, I mean, literally, I just had this conversation on the balcony earlier today. I love you, Sierra. But I think that's it, is we actually, I think, should be having more discussions now about the fact that VC, that tech are wealth creation engines, and it is perfectly fucking legitimate. I'm sorry, I'm swearing a lot. As a person of color, to go in and be like, hey, you know what? This is the currency of this system, and it's actually
Right.
pretty radical for me to accumulate capital as a queer
That's
Latina
right.
woman in this industry. Now, what I do with that capital matters, but like we can't step on our own necks, right?
Right.
We don't need to do that, because the fact is that capital's been stolen from our communities, and part of this is about like a little mission behind lines to get it back.
Yeah.
What she said.
Sorry, I got really hyped up on that.
But the pay me part. Okay. Wayne, going to your question, I'm just trying to think of some of the things I've seen work over the years, at least within my role and within other roles when I talk to people. And so on the interpersonal side, it's really interesting because I'll see this arc of allyship with people. It'll happen this way. You talk to people and they're like, I took unconscious bias training. I believe philosophically that people should be treated, fairly. Okay, let's look at your hiring funnel. Wait a minute. I gotta get someone here right now. It's, I don't have time, it's gonna take too long, right? So you get this, at first you get people like, yes, morally I am bought in. And then when they have to walk the talk, it's like, whoa. But sometimes that changes, and it changes for a couple of reasons. I've seen a lot of people who start thinking about, like, what is my legacy gonna be for my career? And those people, whether they're about to change roles, they're about to retire, they're about to switch, industries, I've seen some of those allies get the most involved. which is amazing. Because the people who were the people in the first group who were like, yeah, morally, I'm all about it. When they get stressed, if their job, if there's something threatening them, you see them turn away from it. But if you get people that are operating on this values-based plane, those are the allies that to your point, I need to go talk to, because they're going to use their political and social capital and their privilege to help make some noise that I need to be made, but I don't need to be the face and the person to do it. So that's one thing, like interpersonally, that I've seen change. The other thing is capitalizing on, there's the tired business case, right? But there's thinking about the technology we're actually building. And so, people are freaking out about bias in AI because, things like deep fakes are happening, right? Like people's faces and words are like getting like misconstrued in what they're saying. People are building, autonomous things that have the ability to harm people. And so capitalizing on like what do we do to create more equitable products themselves, that helps people back into the conversation of who is building the product in the first place. And that's been what's been able to kind of help our team, as in our inclusion and diversity team, get our foot in the door with the product and engineering teams, get wins from actually building products that are more inclusive, and then build some of those allies to come back and help think about the team that's creating it.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's the next step. Attaching this work to actual product outcomes so they can see the return on the investment. I don't think we've had that in the last 5 years. This has all been very emotional, and it's all moral, and it's all that stuff, but they haven't had the tie-in. We haven't had the business case. I mean, of course, thanks to a couple of folks, like 35% more women means that you're going to, right. That's all good. But a lot of companies I want to see the direct connection to the things that I'm building and how diversity is going to influence that. And I think that's like the next 5 years.
So I want to ask one more question and then ask the audience if they have any questions. So if we could have a mic. Just forewarning you all to kind of think about your questions. So we talked about how this work it includes dealing with trauma, our own and other
experiencing
people.
trauma and then dealing with everybody else's
That's
trauma.
right. We also, racism, sexism, ableism, bigotry, a lot of really hard conversations daily. And on top of that, we're also fighting for our own worth. We're fighting for the worth of the programs and the projects that we're doing that are trying to create, where we're trying to create change. So we need self-care, right? We need to take care of ourselves. I learned that the hard way for sure, and I'm sure I'm not alone. One of the things I want to say before I ask the question is that I'm observing that there isn't a lot of budget or focus on self-care for people who are in the workplace, doing the D&I work, also doing the hard, horrible, I would find horrible work, but the hard work of the platforms and the dealing with all the trauma that happens on our platforms too, and it's emotional work, and there's lots of articles that have been written about that. How do we change that? How do we take care of ourselves, and how do we kind of normalize the idea of self-care in this work and care in this work?
Let's go first.
What do you do?
That is a scary answer to your question.
I would just say I try to be really honest with people. So I have so many people that come to me and are like, I want to be in D&I. And I'm like, I want you to know what that costs you. I love my job. I love my work. I feel so much purpose when I get up in the morning, but I also have panic attacks. So that's a thing. I have a personal integrity coach. I have an epigenetic coach. I have a therapist. I have a 10-item daily self-care chore chart on my refrigerator. And I have literally calendar holds in my day I have to get. And I'm lucky to have the resources to access all of these things, on top of having multiple hype lady WhatsApp groups. And we created this thing called Empathy Wine with a silent H, right, for us to deal with our lives. So I've had to reorient literally everything about my life in order to emotionally sustain this job. That's just a fact. Not everyone goes quite as hard as I do. I only have 100 and 0 as my settings.
Have you seen her Twitter feed?
It's a lot. And I have some help with that if you would like introductions. But I would say that is if you're going to go all the way in this, as opposed to be an engineer who also cares, like if you pick a job with other content, you do get a mental break from it sometimes. And that might be a better choice for some people. And that's also an okay choice to make. You don't have to care and have the job title. Because the job title comes with some cost too, in addition to also getting to witness the absolute best of humanity, right? Like you get to see people who just pure altruism and it fills you with joy and happiness, but you have to take the other side of that coin too.
Yeah. My plan is activating other people, period. Like, I cannot do this by myself. We will not move forward if it isn't at least 30% plus folks in the building that behind me, that support me, that know what I'm doing and know what their role is in helping get to the goal, right? So my whole mission every day at work is, yes, to listen to the stories, but then turn around and what are you going to do? What are you doing to help out? And here are some things I think you can do depending on where you are with your fluency and comfortability around this topic. I also use a lot of prayer. I always talk about that. Like, I pray before meetings. I pray before one-on-one conversations. You know, like, I'm like, Jesus, where you at? I need you right this moment. I also use these ladies. I know that I can call on any one of them. Ciara, there's a couple other folks out there in the crowd that know that I can just text them real quick and be like, I need to talk to you right now about this situation, and I know they are going to understand. So having that community of people who are going to understand right off the bat. I also have people inside of my company who may not understand but have lent their ear to me. And so I use that a bit. Also, I schedule a massage. Shout out to Soothe. I don't know if Soothe, anybody works for that app, but thank you, Jesus, for that app, because I have someone come to my house to give me a massage every Sunday, just like it is church. Because if I'm not ready to go Monday morning, relaxed, it's going to be some problems. So, yeah.
Well, you hold that stuff in your.
Oh, yeah. The girl's always like,
Yeah.
you got some knots. I'm like, same knots from last week, but work it out.
I will just quickly say I just took a bunch of notes on self-care because I have a lot of work to do. And I can feel it in my body right now. I just got back from vacation, which was great, but I came back to like,
Yeah.
there's a lot going on. But being in this room right now, to everyone's point, like people whose values I share, people who are trying to shape a different future, it's very therapeutic for me.
What about you, Wayne? Self-care.
Let me see. Self-care. Well, I want to answer that question. I want to go. You trigger something that I want to say about this work and what changed 5 years ago. 5 years ago, this title of head of D&I or VP of global D&I was not hot. That type, like when we started this, when we started doing Take Inclusion, but before that, we were meeting with a lot of other people about other D&I work before it was actually called D&I. People did not have the title. When reports came out, people transitioned to doing something related to the title, right? And then a lot of younger people, and it's fine, and different people, especially brown people of color, was like, I want a D&I job. Without knowing what you all said, that cost.
Yeah.
Be careful what you ask for.
Yes.
Right? So it's like, I want this job because it's hot and it can get me in the door, which is great. I mentored some young black guys who was trying to get a job in tech. It was like, hey, I got opportunity to do some D&I or a coding job. I'm like, get the coding job. Don't talk about diversity. When you get your power, if you want to help bring people up, do that. That was my suggestion to him. And so, as you say, like, a lot has changed past 5 years. So what I do for self-care, Melinda and I ride motorcycles.
Yeah.
Woohoo!
Yes. Nice pictures.
I love that.
Ride motorcycles is a self-care because it's fun. It's something like Shaf was talking about earlier. You get to see the world in a different perspective, and you can focus because you're on that bike, and it's you, the road, and you all humans who I hope you're looking out for us. And you get to see our beautiful planet in a different way. And it makes you grateful. And that has become a great self-care that we have. And then also working out, trying to
do that.
live, eat healthy, meditate, watch good movies, and I'll probably say the number one thing is being super mindful and self-aware of the energy, conversations, and my own behavior of what type of energy I'm putting out into the world. Like, I know what type of energy is a guy who I'm like, energy. Yeah, I'm seeing the audience. Raise your hand. You know what I'm talking about, the hat. Yeah, all right, cool. Talk to him afterwards. But like energy, like be mindful that it's real. And so self-care, that's kind of I look at it in terms of perspective. Melinda, what do you do for self-care?
Well, thanks for asking, Wayne. Well, I ride motorcycle. I ride my own motorcycle just to work.
That's right. Yes.
And it's been life-changing. I started riding a little less than 2 years ago, and it's been just incredible. I also, massage is really important to me. I have meditated every single day for the last 965 days. And I will say that that has been absolutely life-changing, because the massage kind of resets your body, the meditation resets your mind. So those are the three things for me, and also just reminding, I suffer from anxiety and imposter syndrome and all sorts of things, and so reminding myself and being my own best coach, I think in this is hugely important. Like, how do I step into my own power? How do I step into who I am and who I can be, the best person that I can be? And that's all me just telling myself different things. So.
Awesome.
I like it. I like
Yeah.
it.
And connected to that, I have to say this because I'm a big advocate for mental health, especially for Black and brown men.
Yes.
But for everyone too, is like depression is real, right? It's real. I've experienced depression on and off the past 5 years, even before doing this work. But depression is real. We're talking about panic attacks, anxiety, and it's okay to talk about this. And that is a movement I see getting energy moving forward in this conversation on diversity and inclusion. To talk about, yes, self-care, but talking about mental health,
Yeah.
right? And because all this is connected to the triggers that we talked about earlier of all the isms that when we have in this room, because we human and we have stuff in this room, it's not utopia, but when we walk out that door as well, and we pick up our phone, or we go to sleep or have a conversation. So mental health is important. Continue to have these conversations, and how you deal with it on your own. Don't be judgy, but everyone has it. So,
Yeah.
Should we open it up?
yes. All right.
Right.
2, 3 questions. Ask your name, question. You know what I mean?
Raise your hand first and then name and question.
Name and question.
Oh, you got one. Okay, cool.
I'm Demorian Burnside.
One, speak up. Speak up.
I don't have
My
my
question is
glasses
for all the African American Latino people. But I was going to ask you, as the Black community moves forward in civil rights through the Black Lives Matter, the Me Too, and the LGBT movement, we're going to fight again for equality. Just civil rights as far as working in the industry or wherever you may be. So once we win this war, as far as on the equality, do we go back to the bottom after we fought, just like we did in the last war? You know what I mean? And then we help the people who are fighting, who are we helping fight for? They help oppress us as well, just like we did the last time, or do we? So my question is, how do we protect our investment in the civil rights movement moving forward, sir, ma'am?
I think that's an interesting question, because I always like to bring up the fact that this latest wave of diversity and inclusion in newer tech companies, so I'm not talking about the IBMs or the HPs or what are they, the big company, the older ones. I'm talking about since probably like 2013, was started by Reverend Jesse Jackson sending letters to tech companies asking for them to share their diversity and inclusion numbers. So that signal to me means that this is a civil rights movement that we are currently in.
Correct.
The challenge, I think, is that we don't have any civil rights leader coming up besides Reverend Jesse Jackson, who is now in his late 70s, early 80s. So who's going to rise up to keep this conversation going? We're on the inside. And when you're on the inside, you can only do so much. We need some pressure from externally. And maybe that will come from Mr. Leslie Miley from wherever he is, since he likes to drop mics.
Yeah, I definitely think of this role as a wave of civil rights, 100%. And I don't know how conscious I was of that until I got deeper and deeper and deeper into it. Like when I was a consultant and I was working with tons of companies and they were coming to us and saying, hey, this is a problem. It was very different from being inside the company and within that environment and just realizing how many hills you had to climb. But I agree. Like, one, we need to be more cohesive. So we support each other,
Talk about
certainly, but we need to be more cohesive in saying, this is what is broken and this is what we want to fix. And that's a challenge for so many reasons, but I'm reminded of that when Maxine Waters came out to the Bay and met with many of us, and she's like, okay, so what's the problem? And we started talking about things like, the Bay itself. And she was like, look, all right, I was the first decades ago, so get over that and let's keep it moving.
Talking to Auntie Maxine. She's like,
I was like, oh. So yeah, I would say I consider this a part of a civil rights movement, but it's not enough.
yeah, it's not cohesive enough yet.
Yeah.
When I have something, but this is Black civil rights, so you go first.
Interesting question. I want to get to some more questions, but I different response. My response is that this war is never going to be won. It's never going to be over. One, I will, especially in my lifetime, and probably every lifetime. This war is not going to be over anytime soon. And also, it's I would like not to frame it, and I apologize if I'm heard it wrong, but a war of this war. And this war is more important. We're doing an equality war right now. Civil rights war is over here. LGBTQIA war is over here. Trans war is over here. It's not. Let's stop doing that. Let's don't do that. Let's move this. And then the people who is your passion to direct, say, Black civil rights. If you're questioning who is the leader, I'm questioning if you're Black, you can be the leader. What are you doing?
That's right.
Right? And so, if it's not you, go find someone, support people who are doing that focus. But don't compare this other wars and these other battles over here to this war. This war needs to be worked just as hard, but also this war and this battle need to be fought just as hard over here as well. And that's how I view it, because huh? Yeah.
He sounds like an inclusion purist.
Yeah. Let's talk afterwards. Because I may have misunderstood, but that's just how I feel about it. Next question.
Oh, wait. I want to say.
Aubrey,
So
yes,
sorry.
yes,
I want to make a very specific point that I think I'm the person on the panel to make, which is I think there's a really important discussion, and I say this for non-Black people of color, but I'll speak for Latinx folks in particular, which is many of us have the ability to code switch into assimilation, and we have the choice to use that to subsume ourselves into white supremacy or as a tactical weapon. And I mean that I know what my face looks like. Thank you, everyone on Twitter who calls me a white lady when they don't like me. But I'm sorry, it happens every week. They're like, she's white. I'm like, it says Latina in my profile.
There's nothing wrong being white also.
But, right, I'm white-ish, but it's weird, right? One drop, it's white people are freaked out by me and I'm not tan enough. But there's a very particular role that we play, and I say that as a Latinx community because literally we're one of the fastest growing demographic groups in America, and we have the choice to look backwards and say, how do we support Black liberation? Because we know if we secure it for Black Americans, we will secure it for ourselves.
Inclusion purist.
And so I say that's something I take in my work. We've talked about this, op-eds that I've done, things that I've said, certainly things that have been said by Black women before, but often the first time you say something in a space, you get the greatest vitriol. And so part of my work, and I offer this to you as a possibility for you to explore, is I try to say that shit first, because the blowback that hits me is simply going to be less. It doesn't matter if people know that I'm Latina. The fact is I look like their sister. And so I would offer that is that we, as non-Black people of color, have a very intentional and specific role to play as allies and as speaking truth to power, in addition to what white folks do. But I don't think we talk enough about the way that non-Black folks of color should be stepping up.
Can we get a question from a woman or a different identity in the panel, in the court?
I'm
or
gay and
non-binary.
Asian.
Oh,
That young
I have a
lady.
Pick her.
question.
Oh, no,
Please.
I think her. What are your
Please.
pronouns?
All right. Who has
Please.
the mic?
She's so polite.
So I'm a part of the LGBTQ plus community. I am Asian, and I am Asian American. I would love to ask this question if you don't mind.
Please.
Thank you. So we are currently hiring a head of DEI at Ancestry, as many of you might know already.
I'm sorry, it's really hard to hear you all, so if you could just put the mic really close on the
Yep.
stage, the speakers aren't pointed towards us, so.
Cool, you bet. So we're in the midst of hiring a head of DI at Ancestry, as many of you might know. What can we do in the meantime to make sure that we're moving the needle in our I&D efforts without a leader in place?
Hire Aubrey to come and consult.
Come talk to me afterwards. I'm right here.
Hey, talk about bags, man. Like, you have knowledge, they need it, they should pay you. Like, very
That's true.
simple.
I'm trying to
Let's
open
make the
source it right
connection.
now.
Right?
I have to say AubreyBlanche.com because the people that built it in
Right,
the room,
see?
they're really good if you want to know them. No, but I think I'll give a quick answer, which is there's actually a lot of brilliance that's out there for you to guide you already. I think leaders are great, experts are incredible, but think about Project Include. I think Rachel Thomas has written stuff that's a few years old and still just as wise as it was the day she published. Follow folks that are doing this work. So like follow experts on Twitter. I know I'm saying that like that's the most self-promotional shit I've ever said. But like we are out there talking about it, and those of us who are doing the work inside companies can be your nodes to find those other people.
Diversity advocates.
Yeah, Diversity Advocates, incredible group that's supported by the Cape Horror Center. So the resources are out there for you, and connect with us if you want some more guidance.
Google.
Yeah,
That's the only time I'm going to say Google.
and I would say that I hope you learned something today at Tech Inclusion you can take back to your organization. There's a company called Change Catalyst that hosts this conference that you're at right now.
My bad. My bad. I
that
totally
can
forgot,
help you out
guys.
as well.
Hire Change Catalyst, I meant.
And
We'll get you referral.
and we're not hard to find. And good luck with Ancestry.com.
Wait, can I
Go
agree.
ahead, yes.
like plus 5,000. I also want to say that, like, look, we know that having someone in a central, like,
Yes.
D&I role doesn't always work. In fact, it has failed many, many, many times, right? There's so many conditions that have to be in place. There's so much work that has to be done, et cetera. There's support that's needed. The research actually does show that you don't necessarily need to have a head of, but you do need to have a diversity, inclusion, whatever you call it, council that includes powerful individuals in the organizations that will sponsor these initiatives, right? That'll put money behind it, that'll make things happen, that'll say, what the heck happened? We put this plan together like 6 months ago and nothing happened, right? If you have that, whether it's a leadership council, et cetera, you can still make a lot of progress, and sometimes that's better for some companies than having a central role.
Yeah.
Cool. Last question, Melinda?
Yeah, last question.
Yes. You gotta be loud now, and good question.
My name is Desiree. A big thing that I guess my question kind of flipped around as y'all start talking on many different topics, but I guess more so the trivialism of how whenever you have a person that is in a position of such as so, because I've been in tech for about 2 years, and I came from a company where the person was in an ally space, quote unquote, but didn't really take the role of really understanding what oppressions actually exist in women of color's world. I'm Afro-Latina, and I'm more of the Afro than I am of the Latina in regards to I'm not passing. So how do you feel like in regards to whenever we have D&I persons come into this space and come into these companies, and also put the next quote to be, or the next, I guess, an ellipses right there, to say that there's a lot of companies also hiring D&Is to kind of deal with the problem rather than fix the problem itself. So how does one address a person of being an ally? For me, in my world of being an ally, I think it's being a person who is of a lighter complexion in the Black community. It's for me to open that door for a person of color, or explicitly women of color as well that are of darker tones, to say, hey, let me open this platform for you, and you got it, versus someone speaking for me. So I would like for you to speak on that, if you don't mind. And y'all are amazing, thank you.
It sounded like activating allies.
Let me make sure I understand the question.
How do
It
you
was two
activate
different
allies?
things. It was more so It was wanting you to talk on about being like the isms of being an ally or whatever, but also at the same time of how do you approach a situation when a person is of D&I and they're just kind of there to be the solution.
A figurehead?
Basically, they're there to be a face, an idea, but not necessarily to fix the problem.
I think you, one, have empathy for that person because you don't know the circumstances under which they are in that role and in that job. I think always have a one-on-one conversation with anybody you are having trouble with. So whether that's a coffee, going for a walk, you know, can't discount having one-on-one conversations before you start to build up your own stories about where that person is coming from, what that person knows, or the circumstances and context. So I'm all about one-on-one conversations and getting to know first before kind of ascribing, you know, a story without facts.
Yes.
That's just me.
I'm having a conversation. I'm just being super, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this either, but I'm having a conversation with a group of some organizational leaders and some underrepresented employees that are concerned around belonging in their particular organization. And as a black woman, I talked to someone who's going to be part of that conversation, and they said, well, what role is Candace going to play? Like, is she really going to show up and, like, as a black woman and talk about what's wrong here? Or is she going to, like, do her corporate, you know, is she going to be in her leadership role? And I had a couple of reactions to that question. It's fair. Like, some people will have that question because they don't necessarily understand the political dance of this role, right?
That's right.
I literally have to broker, first of all, the whole, like, the dinner was my idea, right? Because I knew that there was a belonging issue, and I was like, I need these leaders to really understand what's actually happening with this group. I need to do it over with some wine, and I need them to hear these stories, right? And the most powerful role that I believe I can play in this interaction is actually to facilitate the conversation. Because I can grab these leaders offline and talk about my experience, but my goal is for those leaders to hear what's actually happening with those employees in their everyday experience. Perhaps to someone in that meeting, I might show up like someone who's not waving the banner. I might show up as a figurehead, right? That is, I'm playing the game so that we get the outcome that is needed. And that they hear those words, right, exactly. And I'm gonna play the game because my goal in the end is for those leaders to hear some really raw stories and get to work and fix it.
Back to the
Right?
qualitative data.
Yeah.
Right.
The stories.
That's some
So yeah, to
We
Rachel's point,
we always are working.
that's some
We be on a
chestnut
hunt.
checkers. That's some chestnut checkers move, you know.
But
people don't
always.
think
I'm
about
doing it all the time.
But I
All day long.
But I
This-
think this
all day
is
long.
something
That's the job.
like Candace. So we talk about this a lot, right? Because people like call us fake or co-opted or whatever because they don't think about the strategic calculus of being what I call an intra-organizational activist.
That's right.
Versus an extra-organizational
That's
activist.
right.
And I think there's a real problem now because of that misunderstanding, where a lot of us who are sitting in the middle of these companies, right, trying to be like Luke Skywalker with the Death Star, right, like get the shot right in the middle of it. Okay, sorry, nerd joke, wrong room. But where we're taking friendly fire from people on our team because they don't understand that political calculus that we're making that's different from the choices they've made.
Yep.
And again, I don't want to put judgment on it because I believe everyone chooses where they can and do their own work. But I think that I can just tell you for myself, like in the last month, like someone called me white supremacist adjacent 5 days after the El Paso shooting, and I spent 4 hours in my bed under a gravity blanket sobbing and texting Rachel.
It's true.
So, and it sucked. Don't feel bad for me. No, it's okay. Like, I'm okay now. I went to therapy. I processed
we got
it.
it.
Like,
We
I had
worked it.
some
We worked
wine.
on it. It was
But
good.
I don't say that because you should feel sorry for me. I think there's a bigger lesson there
Right.
about the fact that we need to understand that we are all playing three-level checkers and that we all have really complicated math that gets us to the choices that we're making.
Yeah.
And we need to be compassionate and empathetic when we're seeking to correct problematic behavior behavior even with our community, right? So like maybe your first shot isn't like writing an op-ed about someone, right? Maybe you listen to Rachel and you go have a one-on-one
have a conversation.
Because I think those conversations, and this is where I hope we go in 5 years, is in 5 years, we actually have a better understanding of the landscape of the different shades and flavors of activism that this is going to take. And we have better operating models, because I'm hella corporate, right? To say, here's your job, here's what you do. Hey, can I tap you over? Please give me some PR pressure so that I can scare the executives and they'll give me more money, and then I'll funnel it back to you, right? Like, we could do that if we stopped yelling at each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I love it. I love it. So the action here is go grab some time with that person, whether it's coffee or a glass of wine or whatever, and ask them what their story is, and then realize we don't know the rest of the story.
Awesome. All right, we are super over.
Way
time.
over.
We are.
Yeah, but
Way
Wayne
over.
said it
You
was
all
okay
can
because
see
you're
this
in
clock.
charge.
Yeah, somehow we lost being in charge a while ago, Aubrey.
Touche.
Oh my God.
Touche.
Yeah, but that
Wow.
was yeah, but that was
I'm
kind
not
of
messing with
fair.
y'all.
That was fair.
I'm
fair.
right
That was
here.
fair.
That was
I'm
really
not messing with
fair.
y'all.
That's what you
That
get
was
when you
not
have
friendly
friends
fire.
on
We're all
stage together.
friends here.
Yeah, that was not yelling.
So we're gonna roll right. You all are gonna sit here, and while we roll into the next thing, if that's all right with you. All right.
Sure.
All right.
Rachel,
What's the
what-
next
All right.
thing?
What's happening? Oh,
So I'm good. So one of the things we want to make sure that we do is that these conversations don't end here. That this was a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of painstaking effort to make this happen, and a lot of amazing people on stage all throughout the day. And so I do want to still ask you all, popcorn style, just like one sentence, really one sentence. What are you going to do differently coming out of here? What's one thing that you're going to do to create change differently than you were before? What are you going to do when you step out here? What are you going to do differently? Go for it. All right. And do we have a mic still? Work towards solutions that are not mandated? That are not Band-Aids. Oh, Band-Aids. Yes, please. What else? Conversation?
Yes.
Yeah.
Talk.
What else?
Listen.
The other half of talking. Somebody got to listen.
Thank you.
Yeah, some of us need to listen a lot. Yeah.
good.
What else? Say something if you see something is not okay. Awesome, awesome. And I'm repeating so that it's captured here. Put out the right energy. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
What did she say?
ask
the
the
right-
right questions.
Ask hard questions. Be uncomfortable. Self-care.
Yeah.
Yes.
100%.
We're just gonna start.
Get soothed.
Share my story. Awesome. Yeah.
Like it.
Express gratitude.
Awesome.
Love that.
Be a better ally.
Yes.
Believe in yourself.
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. Know when to step up, when to step back.
Cool.
Yeah.
Say it again. Seek to
Seek
understand.
to understand. Yes.
Good stuff.
Right is right and wrong is wrong. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing. So we just have a couple of things we just want to say. Is first, thank you all. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Mercy.
Thank you, Wayne and Melinda. Awesome job.
Throw all of it on you.
We want to thank our team. So all of this happens with a team of 5. And I don't know if any of them are actually in this room. They might be.
Taking a nap.
Yeah.
No, they're not taking a nap yet.
That's
but whew. But in addition to Wayne and myself, we have Renzo Santos. Salem Kimball. and Antonia Ford. And they're awesome.
Right.
Also, thank you to Google for Startups for being our presenting partner. We literally could not do this without them, and with all of our sponsors. They have been there from the beginning. Mary Grove was on stage with us, the founder of Google for Startups at the very beginning, and really appreciate them. Thank you to Blend, Bank of America, Indeed, and the Kauffman Foundation. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Lyft, Microsoft for Startups, Illuma, DocuSign, Art Processors, Yelp, Oracle, O'Reilly, Spotify, Lending Club, Reddit, and Databricks. Thank you. What's not on here, I don't think, is thank you to all of our volunteers.
Yes. The awesome humans in the red shirts, get them, well, everybody may not want to hug, but give them a fist bump, high
Give 'em
five.
love, give 'em
Thank
love.
them. Tip them if you want to if they take it. Joking. Bad joke, but thank them. But
It's
seriously.
over 100 volunteers.
Yeah.
And
Oh, wow.
Amazing, amazing. And don't stop here. Don't stop here. Commit to those actions. Really create change in a different way. Do something different than you were doing before. Walk out of here differently. Thank you. Thank
It's
you.
been
all.
5 years. Thank you all.